Well, thank you for taking a few minutes here, Mike.
No.
Obviously, you want to talk about the Lost in the '80s live tour. Tell
Uh,
me, you've been on a few of these type of tours. It's almost like you're getting a new batch of fans every time you do one of these tours. Not only Flock of Seagulls, but also something like the Lost in the '80s live tour.
yeah. These tours are they're quite long, but because you only play for half an hour,
Hmm.
it doesn't physically drain you, whereas if you play your own show, you're playing an hour and a half,
Sure.
and that can just, wipe you out. And the older I get, the more I get wiped out. So I quite like doing these tours where I don't have to work so hard, except for getting there. Traveling is a real pain. As you get on, when you're young, like 20 years ago, I didn't mind. I'll drive right across America to play in California, drive
Sure.
back, have a little holiday. But these days, the traveling is what kills you. The
Hmm.
gigs. And as far as, yeah, getting new fans, because, families bring their kids out. And I don't know about you, but, it's, you like your kids to listen to the same things you did,
Same here.
to educate them. And so when we play these kind of shows, they're more like family shows. And, there are a lot of kids in the audience. And I like it when a kid does the hairdo, you know, and that's fun. I always find a good laugh in that. But yeah, a little bit of education, a little bit of nostalgia.
Sure. I mean, obviously the band has got such a rich history too. It's almost like it's a musical history class for the kids too. They get a chance to taste a little bit of what it was like back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. And, they hear the old stuff like I ran on the radio.
Hmm.
So as they probably have, let's say as a 10-year-old kid, he's probably been hearing that song here and there for 10 years. And then they come and they get it live and they realize the band is still a powerful force. It's not just, we're not just sitting up there twanging away, we put it out there.
Sure. Let me ask you something. I want to take you back a little ways. If I'm not mistaken, if my research is correct, the Korg MS-10 synthesizer, was that your first one that kind of got you, it kind of introduced you to the music that would become Flock of Seagulls?
Yeah. The story with the MS-10 was I went to a shop in Liverpool, a place called Hesse's, and that's where the Beatles bought their gear from. And synths had just come out, so they had one in. And I walked into the store and they're all kind of standing around going, what does this thing do? It's a keyboard with a load of knobs on it and it stood up like something from a 50s sci-fi movie. So knowing that I was a musician kind of thing, and they said to me, what do you think of this? And I started messing with the knobs and I was like, oh yeah, it's great. Great, great. So the owner of the store, he said to me, well, what, they knew me really well. He said, why don't you take it home for a week and then find out what it does and then bring it back and teach a couple of our guys how to make a couple of sounds and stuff. So I said, yeah, okay. So I took it over to our rehearsal place, which was like one street away. And I messed around with it for a week. And then I went back there and they had a couple of more in. And I said, well, I can show you this and show you that. And the owner just went, okay, then you can keep that one that we just lent you out. So that became my first synth. And that was the best synth ever, just that little synth made us all those big drony fat sounds.
Hmm.
That's what it was. Synth. I stuck it through a couple of weird effects. And I got so good at just like singing and altering everything on it because I had no memories. So I just got good with it. And then a couple of years after that, the Jupiter 8 came out and the poor little Korg was put on a shelf, and the big monster was introduced. So with memories and great sounds and stuff. Good time though. Good
But it
time to
still
be a
did. So the sound was still not up to the Korg though, the Jupiter.
yeah, the Jupiter just blew it away, because
Okay.
the Korg I had it going through a couple of cheap chorus pedals. it was chorus to chorus and then
Hmm.
out into guitar amp, which gave it its really rough sound. The Jupiter was much more sophisticated, but had a much deeper um, programming, so you could
Sure.
get that and you could get it polyphonically. So that's where we went.
I'm always interested in how bands create their sound, how they discover their sound. Obviously, with the Korg and then the Jupiter, you had a kind of a whole gambit of sounds, but you really had to fine tune that to kind of find out what the sound would be for Flock of Seagulls.
Um, really, the sound of the MS-10
Hmm.
could be almost transferred over to the Jupiter. Slightly different filters, right? So it didn't
Right.
quite have a growl, um, but you could get a much richer sound from the Jupiter. So it did sound better than the Korg, just slightly different. And because it was polyphonic, I could start playing two finger chords, And then it was, because it had 8 layers of tuning and stuff like that. I got into a bit of that, and I managed to tune out the sound and make it fatter. And it was the Jupiter 8 was so far ahead of its time as a
Hmm.
synth. It did bells, it did pads, it did low basses, it did sweeps and swoops, and the first thing I ever did on a Korg was go meow meow, just make it sweep a bit.
Sure.
Um, and that's why I got into synthesis, because you could mess around with it and just get a weird sound and go, that'll fit, that'll fit somewhere. And then later on, it became more of the Jupiter 8 became more of a playing kind of synth,
Hmm.
in fact, workstation that they call them now.
What was it like putting together that first album and getting the guys together and honing that sound? You guys played, so much in bars and clubs to kind of hone your sound, hone your craft. But making that first album, were all the songs basically kind of ready to go? Did you have everything kind of laid out for you?
Um, yeah, it wasn't really that difficult for us. The only difficult thing was we recorded it in London
Hmm.
in Jive Studios, and they had just completely rebuilt that studio. So they had, I think, the first or second SSL mixing desk. Nobody knew how to use it, So they brought in Mike. I can't remember his second name right now, from Australia, because he'd
Hmm.
used one before. He came along and he just said to us, just start playing. And after a couple of days of us just playing through the songs, playing, we went into the control room and listened, and it sounded absolutely fantastic. And Mike was just right. Okay, then let's make an album. So he had control of all that. He just said to us, just play. You just play, and I'll do the rest. And we did that, and there was not a lot of overdubs or anything like that.
Hmm.
Just everything was recorded live. A couple of things we had to redo. A couple of things we recorded them like 5 or 6 times.
Hmm.
Um, but it just seemed to work. And I think Mike knew the desk so well. And he got our sound down, and he understood what we were trying to do between the synths and the guitars, to get the atmospherics.
Hmm.
And Mike Howlett, who was the producer, he was such a good producer that he basically did not try to push the band to do anything different. He just wanted to control what we were doing, get it down on tape, and go from there. Because they both said, you guys don't need producing, you just need recording properly to get the right weight on the drums. I mean, they weren't used to working with bands that used, basically all electronics. It was new
Hmm.
stuff to them. They did. I mean, I think Mike Howlett had worked with orchestral maneuvers in the dark and a couple of
Right.
those people, and he had a kind of an understanding. And They just let us run with it, and they never pushed us. I think if they'd have pushed us to do, I don't know, more traditional kind of mixing, it would have intimidated us because we were so new to the recording, big recording studios.
Yeah.
So they just let us run with it, and then they did it. They did their thing in their room, and we did our thing in our room. it just turned out fantastic,
I mean, that's so good that you didn't have somebody who was micromanaging everything that you did, and they kind of let
Right.
you grow in the studio kind of organically.
Yeah, and then if they wanted something replacing or redoing it, it wouldn't be like immediately, oh, that was not right. It would be like, hey, I think we could improve that. If you do that again, maybe the timing will be slightly different, and it'll improve it. So that's the way we went about it. No, get back in there and do that guitar properly. Sing that note. Can you hit a higher note? Just get on with it. Do it again if it doesn't work. But no pressure. It was great.
Oh man. And then when you take a look at the influence the band had on the music, it's even you're still feeling it today. But for here in America, obviously the electronic music we heard a little bit out of the Cars. Greg Hawkes, I think he was he kind of laid the blueprint on some of the stuff. But Gary Newman, I thought he was revolutionary coming out, and then right on the
Yeah.
heels was Flock of Seagulls. I mean, you're right there taking the next step, and I thought it was just a revolution. Hearing it, you heard it off from there. Howard Jones, Tom Dolby, they all kind of exploded right after you came out. It was just revolutionary what you were doing.
Yeah, we were slightly ahead of the bunch, and I think part of that was because we were a live band. I think maybe the other guys weren't so attuned to playing live, and we came to America and we could immediately go on stage, whereas I think they had to develop a band, develop a crew, and all that stuff. We had
Mm-hmm.
all that in place, and when we just came over and started playing clubs and stuff like that, and people were like blown away because they never heard anything like it. A lot of people just stood there with their mouths open, and they're like, "What the hell is this?" But I think we were kind of built for America, with synths and guitars and the big beats. I think the
Mm-hmm.
clubs like the average radio listener liked the guitars and stuff like that. And then the kids that were into more like new wave-ish coming up stuff were into the synths and the spacey lyrics and stuff like that. We would, in a way, just lucky we hit it right on the head.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like it when people dismiss and say, well, MTV helped. And of course it did. But I thought
Yeah,
radio, you just mentioned it, radio really latched onto you before, because I grew up in an area where MTV, we didn't get it until 84, and you'd already been out for 2 years. We heard you
right.
all the time on the radio, which was great. One of my favorite songs from you, Telecommunication. That was probably the first
Yeah,
song that I remember hearing, and it wasn't Iran. And I got a chance to hear that, and I was blown away by it and couldn't wait. I was like all over Flock of Seagulls, wanting to hear more, and was pleasantly surprised every time I heard a new song. So,
right.
I just don't like it when people latch on MTV to you. Helped, but radio is what really broke it for you over here.
Yeah, radio was great to us. MTV was great to us. Um, Anything that promotes you, even if it's people standing on the street going to go and listen to
Mm-hmm.
this,
Yeah.
that's great for a band. And I think people that they say, oh, MTV band or something. I think there's just jealousy that you know
Mm-hmm.
that he came up, and it's a pity there's not an MTV like that now.
Yeah.
To help bands out and stuff like that. Now that it's all streaming and that it's much harder, I think, to break a band these days. You have to have Disney money to do
Big
it.
time. Yeah,
Yeah,
you just don't see that anymore. And radio is not like it was. You didn't have DJs who
no,
could program their own shows and break new bands. You don't have a
yeah,
Richard Blade like he used to, and play songs that weren't even hits, which is something that is a lost art.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it used to be, didn't it? The DJs picked the songs they liked,
Hmm.
and they would introduce the public to them. But these days, everything's so corporate these days. that I think even radio, they're told what to play. They might get, you could play 2 of your own songs, but the other 5 hours have to be what we tell you,
Sure.
something like that. So.
Well, I had a fan question and was wondering, were you surprised by the immediate success of Iran and the first album? A lot of bands have to build themselves up, but they want to know, were you really surprised at the immediate success?
Um, yeah, obviously we thought it was a good album. We thought every song on it was good. Um, it came out a year after it was supposed to. Um, and it was a bit of a shock that America took to it so quickly. In England, they didn't take to it so quickly, because uh, the new wave thing was breaking there really big, and a lot of bands, sadly, were going, "Oh, America, we don't care about America."
Hmm.
Whereas we were like, "Hang on, we like a lot of American bands. We like lead guitar, and we like synths, and we like heavy drums." And in England, they were very, well, you could almost say elitist about the way they went about it. Later on, it changed. I think Duran Duran changed a bit of that because they used a bit of guitar. Um, for us, I don't think we expected it to be that big, but because we went on tour with the Police and Psychedelic Furs and stuff like that, that gave us a great crowd to play to, who understood what we were doing. When you listen to the Police and Synchronicity, it's
Hmm.
almost got a new wave edge to it, but it's not new wave.
Sure.
Whereas we were 90% new wave, the Police were about 40% new wave. But that their crowd really took to us. Um, in fact, at one gig, Sting said to me, "If you guys get any better, we're going to throw you off the tour." So,
You had to go, okay, we'll hold back a little bit.
okay. Interesting.
Well, you've
No,
been
but
doing it
they
so many years, though, too. I mean, I used to work at a little hotel when I was just getting out of high school, a place called the Holiday Inn in Sebring, Florida. And you guys came through, played the crowd, it was a packed show. But you play, it doesn't matter where you play. It's like you're playing at an arena crowd, and you give the people their money's worth. And that's the one thing that I noticed about Flock of Seagulls through the years that I've seen them.
Yeah, we always try to put it out. I don't care if there's 2 people there or 20,000. I like to do what I do on stage, and that is, to put it out, make it like I believe in this, so I'm going to put it out there.
Mhm.
And I think some acts, they, if there's not a good crowd, they don't get the vibe.
Sure.
I like, if I play to 2 people, I want them both to come up to me and go, "You guys were great."
I'd like to ask you about a few of your former band members, and the first one is Paul. I thought that synchronicity between, you know, it wasn't like you guys were fighting for space. You really melded the guitars and the keyboards, and that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, I think that came from the fact that none of us could really play anything. We just made bits and pieces up as we went along, and
Hmm.
eventually fell into songs. So there would be times when I would say, "I just got to hold this one note and I'm
Hmm.
going to sing, and there's going to be a gap. So put something in the gap. And some of the times we'd fall about laughing about what was put in, and other times we'd go, "Just do that again. And it, it, we didn't really think that it was important.
Hmm.
It's not, we're going to say, "Well, this is our 10th album and it's got to sell 5 million." At that time, it was a case of like, "Oh, if we can just get this song finished and into
Yeah.
some kind of shape, we're there, and then we can move on." So we had a good laugh, and we had this thing that when a song really worked out, we'd all stand on chairs and get up
Okay.
high and play it like that. And if it sounded good up there, then we had it. So we did that a bit. People think you only write 10 or 12 songs for an album, but we actually wrote I don't know, 50, 60 songs, or bits and pieces of songs. And
Sure.
a couple of them kind of slid together and changed the key and stuff like that. And because we couldn't play, we just made it up. And if it sounded good to us, it was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you had an amazing rhythm section too with Frank and your brother Ali. Just, I thought again, one of those helped make the signature sound of Flock of Seagulls.
Yeah. Ali is a pounding drummer. He
Mm-hmm.
hits, I've never seen anyone hit drums as hard as he does. He used to break sticks all the time and then throw them at me. but he really, and I think that comes from rehearsal as well. We didn't mic the drums up, so to be heard, he had to hit them hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that just carried on as we went to play gigs and stuff. Then they got mic'd up and sounded huge, Frank and Ali, we used to call them, the noisy ones.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas me and Paul, we did the fiddly bits, as they say,
Sure.
So yeah, the band was kind of split into a rhythm section and a fiddly bit section.
Sure. Um, I'd like to discuss just a little bit briefly on Iran. Can you take me through the genesis of that song? Obviously, it was the third song. It took a while for the album. It was the third single, but just tell me the genesis of that song and obviously its impact.
The song started out. We had some music, just a little, rehearsal piece, and we'd say let's play that a little bit, and we'd play it for half an hour, and nothing would come out of it, so we'd stop playing it and move on to something else. And then one day we were looking to try and release a single on our own because we didn't think we'd get a record deal. And we went to a place in Liverpool where there was a company called Zoo Records. They had Teardrop Explodes and a couple of other bands. And when we were talking to them, on the wall and behind them was a picture of two people, like a 50s picture, black and white, two people running away from a flying saucer. We went back to rehearse, and that picture was on my mind because that was exactly what I was into at the time, sci-fi and stuff like that. And we picked up, started playing that piece of music, and I just started making up lyrics, about the picture, and it all fitted together. And so we kept playing it, and I just kept thinking of lyrics and the flying saucer coming through the clouds and the people, I couldn't get away from it and stuff like that. And after a couple of hours, the whole song had written itself, and that's, I tell people, I don't write songs. Songs write me. They come to me and they write themselves. I don't actually ever sit down and think, oh, I'm going to write some lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
I just go with what comes. So Iran then developed. When we started doing it live, a couple of people said, wow, that's like an epic song, and I never thought it was personally. I just thought, it's done. Then when we signed with Jive Records, they said, oh, we want that to be the single. And I was like, how's that going to be a single? It doesn't really show us to what we're doing, where Space Age to me was, much more like we wanted to be.
Right.
But it turned out they were right. Actually, when it came to be recorded and mixed, Mutt Lang came in and helped us to mix it. And he said, this is a great song. It's going to be a hit. And we were like, well, okay, fine. Let's see what happens. They took it, they put it out in America, and they were exactly right. It had the right vibe for America. It was the right song to break us. I think it got up to number 9 or number 8 or something like that.
Yep.
And to us, it was a shock because, 6 months earlier, we were just sitting around in the studio going, well, what's next? The album's done. What are we going to do? And then suddenly we're out in America playing 50,000 people a night with the police and stuff like that. And Iran was the prince of our ball. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's with Iran. I think we started with Iran and finished with it on our set, and everybody went crazy. And it made us the poor rock stars we are today.
Well, I was going to ask you how it impacted, going from you're a starving musician to you've got a hit song and you're internationally known. It was almost like night and day, for you.
Yeah, it was, and it was like we came to America, we started doing gigs, ended up getting bigger and bigger and bigger, playing 50,000 people a night, which was just, you can't explain the shock of that. Playing in a pub 6 months ago to 50 people, now you're playing to 50,000 people, and at least half of them knew the song. So we used to come off stage just bewildered, really.
Mm-hmm.
We get here, don't look backwards. For God's sake, don't look back, it's too far. It's too high now. And I think we just hoped that it didn't stop.
Yeah.
And for about 3 years it didn't stop, and then it started to slow down and stuff like that. But what a ride.
It was an amazing ride for you. It's still going today.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about music videos and not just specific ones, but I remember talking to Jack Black from Night Ranger. And he said, all I wanted to ever be was a rock star. But now I'm having to be an actor, and I know yours didn't have the production or whatever, some of the other videos later on, but was that kind of, do we really have to do this? Making music videos?
Yeah, but to tell you the truth, I don't like making music videos either. I'm not an actor. I'm not. I'm not even a singer or a musician, really. I just, I toy about with it, and I luckily come up with some songs and ideas. Videos are great for showing off the band,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not particularly my cup of tea. I know they have to be done sometimes. In the 80s, it was crazy because you had to spend a fortune on your videos just to make them look as good as someone else's. These days, it's not so bad. Everybody's got an iPhone and can make a cheap video if they want,
Mm-hmm.
which to me is preferable to having a camera crew. It's just, I don't know how actors and actresses do it, because being a musician, or kind of a musician, that's what you wanted to be, not in videos.
I mean, the byproduct is obviously good. Like you said, it kind of gives you exposure. I know the original, premise behind videos is because a lot of people could not tour in other countries. You could get a video out to some. Beatles used to use it. They used to
Yeah.
get videos out into other countries, wouldn't have to tour, and they could still get the aesthetic, still get promotion without the need to tour.
Yeah.
But of course, MTV changed all that.
Yeah, of course they did. Changed everything, didn't they?
It's the biggest radio station in the world.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, videos, they definitely have their place. And who would be without them if you really, record companies love them.
Sure.
I'm sure, like when I do the filming for the videos we do these days,
Mm-hmm.
feel a little bit constricted. But when I see the finished thing that the video guys have done, I'm like, wow, that's really good. How did they do that? So these days, I'm not so against them being in them and stuff like that. But there were times when I just used to go, I don't want to be in it. I don't want to. You've got to promote this record. And then it was a case of like, okay, drag me out of bed and I'll come and do it. And just knowing that you'd spent, I don't know, $150,000 on a video, it used to blow my mind because I had nothing in the bank.
Is that how much Iran cost?
No, I think It's Not Me Talking. We did a video for, I think that cost 150 grand, which to us, just boys from Liverpool, that's like that would have kept us alive for 3 years, you know.
Exactly. Last question, or at least I want to wind this down. I know you got to go, but I want to talk to you about Ascension and the going with the Prague orchestra that you symphonic orchestra. What was that experience like? Taking the songs that you had done and just giving it a new life.
Well, it wasn't our idea.
Okay.
It was August Day, the record company. It was their idea. They came to us and they said, "We want to do your stuff orchestrally, and what do you think?" And I went, "Oh, okay, yeah. I've never even thought of anything like that." So they did a couple, played it to us, and I thought it was great. And I'm like, "Yeah, go ahead, make an album." They did the first one, they did the second one,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, it was great. I worked on the second one a lot more than on the first one.
Sure.
Um, and because by now I understood what they were talking about. But when somebody comes up and goes, "Yeah, let's do Iran with an orchestra," your mind goes, "What?" Hey, I don't quite get that. But it did work out, and I like them. And then lately they released our new album, Some Dreams,
Mm-hmm.
new songs, and I think for a small company, they've done really well. I think their ideas are good and their promotion and stuff is pretty good. Yeah.